Do you ever have that feeling like you're just running on empty? Like doesn't matter how much sleep you got, you wake up and you just feel drained. Like half your energy is already gone before the day even probably gets going.
Oh, yeah.
That sense of being always on, always available, always giving. And it just feels like your space, your time, your energy, it's just getting chipped away bit by bit.
It really is that sense of overwhelm, isn't it? Like you're just constantly pouring from a cup that somehow never gets refilled.
Exactly.
And you end the day just depleted, wondering, where did it all go?
Yeah, absolutely. And that feeling, I think, it hits home for so many people, this kind of invisible leakage of peace and energy. And that's precisely where we're diving in today. This deep dive is all about getting that peace back, getting that energy back, and really understanding this, powerful, sometimes uncomfortable, let's be honest, but ultimately really liberating practice, setting boundaries.
And maybe think of it less like, building these big, harsh walls to keep everyone out. It's more like defining the property lines for your own well-being, creating these healthy, respectful spaces, both for yourself and within your relationships where your energy can actually thrive, not just, barely survive.
I like that, property lines. So our mission today is basically to unpack this stack of really great sources we found, articles, insights from psychologists, wellness experts, practical guides with universities too. We want to get to the heart of what boundaries actually are in a way you can grasp.
Yeah, make it tangible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And understand why they're so fundamentally tied to our happiness, our mental health, our emotional well-being, and definitely our energy levels. We're going to look at how you can spot the signs, those undeniable signals that you really need them. We'll dig into some of those maybe surprising psychological reasons why it feels so incredibly hard to set them sometimes.
Oh, definitely.
And most importantly, lay out a clear, kind of actionable way you can start putting them into practice, even when it feels, awkward or even a bit scary.
Yeah, and the material we've pulled together for you, it's pretty rich. It blends, the solid psychological definitions and research findings with really relatable examples and step-by-step guidance. So we're aiming to synthesize all that, pull out the most valuable pieces, and give you a really clear, practical understanding of how setting healthy boundaries isn't just about protecting yourself. It's actually a path towards a more peaceful, more energized, and honestly, more fulfilling life. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's do it. So starting right at the beginning, what are boundaries? It sounds like such a straightforward word, but when you start looking at how different experts define it, you realize there are layers to it. How do our sources help us pin this down?
Well, one way they're described, quite simply really, is as the limits we set.
Okay, limits.
Yeah, and these limits are absolutely crucial for protecting our emotional space, our mental space, even our physical space. And what's emphasized is that these aren't like rigid universal rules. They're deeply personal. They look different for everybody based on, your own needs, your circumstances.
So creating a kind of personal perimeter. Got it. Another source used a term I thought was interesting but more formal, a psychological demarcation.
Yes, that comes more from the psychology literature, a demarcation like drawing a line specifically designed to protect your individual integrity.
Integrity, huh?
Yeah, it really highlights this idea that boundaries are fundamentally about maintaining your sense of self, keeping yourself distinct from others,
I like that, protecting your integrity. It makes it feel less about just convenience and more about preserving, who you are. And then there's that other idea, boundaries as limits defining you in relation to something or someone else, and that they can be physical, emotional, even intangible.
Exactly. And that really shows just how broad boundaries are. It's not just about, how close someone stands to you. It's also about your emotional availability, how you let people talk to you, what topics you're willing to engage with, how you manage your time. Another definition really paints a picture of boundaries as the delineation of your own personal space, like your feelings, your thoughts, your needs, your ideas. And the real power in that definition, I think, is that it's about allowing you to just be yourself, not feeling like you have to be an extension of someone else or, constantly shape yourself into who you think others expect you to be.
Oh, that really resonates. That feeling of kind of losing yourself a bit, becoming a chameleon to fit in. So if we pull these definitions together, the core purpose seems to be about clearly defining you, your space, your needs, and then, crucially, protecting those resources.
Precisely. They're seen as essential tools, yes, for defining our personal space, but also, critically, for safeguarding our time and, importantly, nurturing healthier relationships. Because, ultimately, boundaries dictate what kind of behavior is acceptable from others towards you.
That last point feels huge. It's not just a shield you put up. It's
Right.
actually setting the ground rules for how people interact with you.
Exactly.
So the why behind boundaries is really, it's foundational, isn't it? It connects straight back to our well-being, our sense of peace, and that energy we were talking about right at the start.
Absolutely. Safeguarding your mental and emotional well-being, that's probably the reason that comes up most across all the sources. They're described as crucially important for cultivating healthy relationships and preserving your own personal peace. It's really not an exaggeration to say they're fundamental for a sustainable, healthy life.
And it's within those healthy relationships that boundaries really seem to shine,
Yeah.
right? By making expectations clear. One expert we looked at framed it really nicely, saying, healthy boundaries aren't about shutting people out, but about creating these healthy spaces internally and in relationships where your energy can actually thrive.
Yeah, she talked about it from personal experience, about how setting boundaries is actually a profound form of self-love. It's about honoring yourself.
Self-love?
Yeah, it's like saying, my needs matter, my peace matters, my energy is important. It's an act of valuing yourself, which, another source explicitly connects to overall wellness.
That definitely shifts the perspective. It's not a rigid rule. It's an act of self-care. And it directly preserves physical and emotional energy.
Totally. By setting those limits, you're supporting your own resilience. You're stopping that constant drain that happens when you feel obligated or you're trying to be endlessly available for absolutely everyone. It puts you back in the driver's seat, managing your own resources.
And this idea of being in charge, actively managing your resources, that's what leads some experts to call healthy boundaries essential for health and sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Some even call it real self-care, distinguishing it from maybe more surface level things.
Right. It's foundational. It's not just a nice to have.
And what's really powerful here is that this isn't just like theory or people's opinions. It's actually backed up by research. One source highlighted quite a few studies on the impact of boundaries.
Yeah, and the findings are pretty compelling. For instance, one study back in 2020 looked specifically at emotional boundaries, and it found that people with weaker emotional boundaries, they consistently reported higher levels of stress and also more relationship dissatisfaction.
Wow. So leaky emotional boundaries directly linked to more stress and unhappier relationships. That makes a ton of sense, actually. If you're constantly soaking up other people's stuff without limits or feeling like you're being taken advantage of course that's going to cause friction and stress.
Exactly. And then another study, this one from 2022, focused more on the workplace. It found that people who regularly enforce their boundaries, things like, not answering emails late at night, saying no to unreasonable demands.
That's tough stuff.
Yeah, they were significantly less likely to experience burnout.
There it is. That direct link to preserving energy and preventing that total depletion.
Yeah.
Research proven. Setting boundaries is like a powerful anti-burnout strategy.
It really is. And looking even broader at mental health, research from 2021 showed that people who really struggled to set boundaries were statistically more likely to report symptoms of anxiety and depression.
Huh. That suggests that not being able to create these protective limits isn't just inconvenient. It might actually contribute to mental health challenges. It kind of raises the question, right? Is it a symptom or a cause? But the research seems to point to it being a pretty significant contributing factor.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And fascinatingly, another piece of research from 2020 again found that individuals who maintained healthy emotional boundaries were actually better equipped to regulate their own feelings.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they could respond more calmly in stressful situations instead of just getting immediately reactive or feeling totally overwhelmed.
So the boundaries act like a sort of buffer,
Yeah.
giving you space to process and choose how you respond instead of just being swept away by the intensity or whatever pressure is coming at you.
Exactly. They protect that inner emotional space, which allows for greater self-control, greater resilience. So you can see the connection between setting boundaries and experiencing more peace, more energy, less stress, less burnout, better mental health. It's not just a nice idea. It's a pattern that's clearly supported by psychological research.
That's incredibly persuasive.
Yeah.
It really elevates boundary setting from just, a personal preference to a fundamental practice for a healthy, functioning life. It's like the invisible architecture holding up your well-being.
It really is. And without it, the whole structure can get pretty shaky.
Okay, so if boundaries are that critical, how do we know when ours are? let's say, getting a bit flimsy.
Mhm.
How do we recognize the signs that our peace and energy are consistently being drained because our boundaries are maybe leaky or even non-existent?
This is where you really have to tune in to your internal experience. Your body, your emotions, they send out vital signals. One source actually calls them your internal compass.
An internal compass.
Yeah, pointing directly to the areas where boundaries are needed most.
Let's look at some of those specific signs then. One source lists 10 pretty common ones, and the first one is that feeling we kicked off with,
Yeah.
just being overwhelmed and exhausted.
Right. And this shows up as constantly feeling drained, right? Perpetually busy, like you're always burning the candle at both ends. You might find yourself sacrificing your personal time, maybe sleep, maybe rest, because you feel like you have to keep doing, keep giving. That feeling isn't just, normal tiredness. It's often a sign you're pushing way past your limits for availability and output.
That definitely resonates. When you're constantly pushing past what's sustainable for you, that deep exhaustion is like a physical symptom screaming boundary issue. What's sign number 2?
Fear of rejection or abandonment. This can really drive you to overcompensate in how you act.
How so?
Like constantly saying yes, working way harder than you need to, avoiding asking for help, all because you're scared that if you don't, people will disapprove or they'll leave or they'll think less of you. It's a really powerful driver for having poor boundaries.
Fear is such a sneaky barrier, isn't it? It makes us act against our own best interests just to feel safe in the moment.
Okay, sign number 3 is resentment.
Ah, yes, resentment. Classic sign that boundaries either haven't been set or they've been crossed over and over again. It's that quiet, simmering frustration you feel when your time isn't valued, maybe when plans keep getting changed on you, or when you just feel like others are taking advantage of your willingness to help. That slow burn anger, that's your internal alarm system going off. Resentment.
Yeah.
It's like bottled up boundary violations, just festering. It can really poison relationships from the inside out. Okay, sign 4, guilt and shame.
This one is incredibly common. Feeling guilty or even ashamed if you even think about saying no, or if someone expresses disappointment when you do manage to set a limit. It's that awful feeling of, I must be doing something wrong just for trying to protect your own space or time. This guilt, it keeps so many people stuck, never even attempting to set a boundary.
Which ties directly into sign number 5. Difficulty saying no.
Absolutely. If saying the word no feels almost physically impossible, if you constantly find yourself agreeing to things you just don't have the time or energy for, leaving you with this never-ending to-do list simply because you can't bring yourself to decline requests, that's a huge flashing sign that your boundary muscles really need some strengthening. That desire to please or maybe to avoid any conflict, it just overrides your actual capacity.
Oh, the people pleaser trap. So relatable. Okay, sign 6. A strong need for external validation.
Yeah, if you find you're relying heavily on other people's approval to feel good about yourself or, say, your work, it becomes incredibly difficult to set limits. You might be waiting for someone else to say, wow, you're working too hard, or you really deserve a break, before you actually give yourself permission to slow down or say no. Your sense of worth gets tangled up with external opinions, making it really hard to prioritize your own needs without that outside okay.
Right. If your value feels conditional on being available and agreeable, setting a boundary feels like you're risking your worth. Okay, sign 7, neglecting personal needs.
This is when you consistently put other people's needs or their requests ahead of your own basic self-care. Things like skipping meals, losing sleep, canceling that walk you planned, or that quiet time you scheduled because somebody else needs something from you right now. Your own well-being just keeps getting pushed to the bottom of the list.
Like you finally schedule a quiet evening and then boom, a demanding last-minute request comes in and you just automatically say yes, wiping out your own plans.
Yeah.
Okay, number 8, low self-esteem or self-worth.
Yeah. This one often lies underneath many of the other boundary issues. If you fundamentally struggle with feeling worthy, like you actually deserve rest or space or to have your needs met, it's incredibly difficult to prioritize your well-being or set those limits. You might have this underlying belief that your only value comes from what you do for others rather than just from who you are.
A human doing versus human being idea again, that's powerful. Okay, sign 9, avoiding confrontation at all costs.
This looks like, well, tolerating really uncomfortable or maybe even harmful situations for way too long. Maybe it's a roommate's disruptive habits or a colleague's inappropriate comments or even just neighbors being excessively loud. You put up with it because the thought of actually confronting the issue feels way worse than just living with the ongoing problem. You end up prioritizing avoiding an awkward conversation over actually resolving something that's draining your peace.
Yeah, suffering in silence just to keep the peace externally, even if it's chaos internally. And the 10th sign is very closely related. It's just a general fear of conflict or confrontation.
Right. This is a broader reluctance to get into any conversation that might involve disagreement or, any kind of intensity. It can lead you to just keep your true feelings or needs totally hidden, make it really hard to be vulnerable, and cause you to avoid necessary, difficult conversations, all of which stops you from setting and maintaining healthy boundaries.
Wow, those 10 signs paint a really clear picture of how boundary issues can manifest in our lives. Were there any other key indicators that came up in the sources?
Yeah, a couple more. Consistently making compromises and sacrifices that just leave you feeling totally depleted. That's another big one. Also, noticing if people seem to repeatedly take advantage of your good nature, or if they consistently push past limits you have actually tried to set, that suggests either the boundaries weren't clear enough, or maybe the enforcement piece is missing.
And one expert shared that personal experience of just feeling utterly depleted at the end of the day, realizing her energy was literally being siphoned away by situations where she hadn't set limits. That drained feeling itself is a massive red flag.
Totally. Your emotions like anger, frustration, resentment, they aren't just negative feelings to be ignored. They are crucial signals. They're your internal compass, practically screaming that a boundary is needed or that one has been violated. Paying attention to them is really the first step in recognizing that need.
And to help with that recognition, one source suggested a reflective tool called the Healthy Boundaries Hula Hoop Practice. I kind of love the visual on that.
It's pretty simple, but really effective. You imagine, or you can actually draw, a large circle like your personal hula hoop. Inside that circle, you write down everything that gives you energy, makes you feel safe, valued, supported. These are the situations, the people, the activities that respect your boundaries.
Okay, so the good stuff goes inside the hoop. What about outside?
Outside the circle, you write down everything that causes you stress, drains your energy, or makes you feel unsafe, devalued, or unsupported. These are the people, the situations, the commitments that are likely pushing or maybe even violating your boundaries. Doing this exercise can make it visually very stark where your energy is being nurtured and where it's being drained, helping you pinpoint the areas that most urgently need some boundary attention.
That's a really practical way to move from just a vague feeling of being drained to having specific examples right there in front of you.
Okay.
So we get what boundaries are. We know how to spot the signs that ours might be struggling. But if they're so crucial for our peace and energy, why is setting them often so incredibly difficult? What are these invisible walls, these psychological barriers that get in our way?
Yeah, this really gets to the heart of the challenge, doesn't it? Many sources point to these really deep-seated patterns and learned behaviors that we pick up over a lifetime.
And right near the top of that list, I imagine, is people-pleasing.
Absolutely. It comes up again and again as one of the biggest barriers. It's that strong, often pretty unconscious tendency to prioritize other people's needs, their feelings, their expectations way above your own. And it usually stems from this deep desire to be liked, to be accepted, or just to avoid disapproval.
And it often goes way back, right? One expert pointed out that starting from a young age, we might internalize these messages that our boundaries, like saying no, or expressing a preference that's different, or just wanting some space, are somehow not nice or selfish. We learn that accommodating everyone else is how you become a good or kind person.
Exactly. We get conditioned, really, to believe that putting ourselves first is inherently wrong or mean. So the very idea of setting a boundary can feel like you're committing some kind of moral failing.
Which brings us right back to that really powerful barrier of fear. What are the specific fears that are holding people back here?
Oh, the fears are numerous and they run deep. There's the fear of rejection or abandonment if you actually set a limit. There's the fear of disappointing people, colleagues, friends, family who've maybe gotten used to your lack of boundaries.
Yeah.
And then there's that pervasive fear of creating conflict or somehow jeopardizing relationships you really value. The potential cost relationally just feels way too high.
That makes total sense. I mean, we're wired for connection, right? So anything that feels like it might threaten those connections naturally triggers these deep anxieties.
And right alongside fear, there's that incredibly common feeling of guilt that we mentioned earlier. So many sources emphasize just how powerful guilt is when you're thinking about or actually trying to set boundaries.
Why does guilt loom so large in this process?
Well, there seem to be several reasons. For one, it might just be a new concept, either for you or for the people around you, and anything new often feels uncomfortable. Or maybe you grew up in a family or environment where boundaries just weren't modeled or respected. But a huge source of guilt is the anticipation or sometimes the actual experience of the other person's negative reaction, their disappointment, their anger, maybe even passive aggression.
So a lot of the guilt isn't even about our action. It's about us mentally managing their potential feelings before we even say anything.
Exactly. You're already shouldering their emotional load before you've even opened your mouth.
Okay.
And fundamentally, as we touched on with the signs, many people feel guilty simply because they're not used to putting their own needs first. It just feels inherently wrong or selfish to do so. And that connects directly back to issues of low self-esteem and self-worth.
Right. If you don't truly believe deep down that you deserve to have limits or to prioritize your own well-being, then setting a boundary feels like you're making some kind of illegitimate demand.
And one source brought up another really fascinating internal barrier, are cherished identities.
Cherished identities. What does that mean?
Well, maybe you've built up an identity around being the go-to person, right? The rescuer, the one who can always handle everything, the hero. Setting boundaries means you have to start dismantling that identity, letting go of that role, and that can feel incredibly unsettling, even if that very role is completely burning you out.
Wow, that's deep. So it's not just about the external pressure from others. It's an internal resistance to changing who we think we are, or maybe who we think we need to be to feel valuable. The inner critic must play a big role here, too.
Oh, absolutely. If your internal soundtrack is full of negative self-talk, you're not good enough, you're being so selfish, just do it, don't be difficult. That voice is actively working against any effort you make to set boundaries. It just reinforces all the fears and the guilt. So doing the work to cultivate a more self-compassionate inner ally becomes really crucial to counter that.
Okay, so it's this really complex mix of learned behaviors, fears of what others will think or do, that internal guilt, self-worth issues, maybe these cherished identities we cling to, and that harsh inner critic. Wow. No wonder setting a boundary can feel like climbing a mountain sometimes.
It really can.
But it is possible, and there's a process. Which brings us neatly to section 4, building the framework. How do we actually do this boundary setting thing?
Right. Well, the first and maybe most crucial point that comes up across all the sources is that this is a process. It's not a one-time event. It takes time, it takes practice, and it takes consistent effort. It's really an ongoing journey of learning and refining.
Okay, so don't expect perfection on the first try. Got it. Let's look at the steps. One source laid out a really helpful 4-step framework with step 1.
Step 1 is identify. You have to first recognize when a boundary is actually needed. And as we talked about earlier, your emotions are absolutely key here. Feelings like anger, frustration, resentment, they're usually pretty reliable indicators that a boundary is being crossed or that one needs to be established.
So listen to those feelings. Treat them as signals, not just something annoying to push down. What else helps with identifying the need?
Reflecting on your core values is another good one. Is a particular situation asking you to act in a way that really conflicts with what you deeply value? That's a strong sign. Also, simply observing people you know who seem to have healthy boundaries can give you ideas about where you might need them in your own life. And of course, this is exactly where that hula hoop practice we mentioned is so useful. It visually helps you identify those situations that are draining your energy or peace.
Yeah, that visualization makes it much more concrete.
Okay, step 2, define. So once you know you need a boundary, what exactly does that involve? This is where you figure out what the boundary is actually going to be. You need to ask yourself, what's my desired outcome here? What needs to be different for me to feel safe or respected or energetic in this situation? And critically, what actions can I control to achieve this? It's really about setting a realistic limit that you can maintain, rather than trying to demand that someone else completely change their whole personality. You define your line and figure out what you will do to hold that line.
Okay, so it's less about forcing the other person to change and more about clearly stating your limit and what your response will be if it's crossed.
Yeah.
Got it. Step 3, communicate. Because, people aren't mind readers, right?
Exactly. It's absolutely essential to let others know what your boundaries are. One source really emphasized that it's just not fair to expect people to respect limits they don't even know exist. And planning out what you're going to say can be incredibly helpful, almost like writing yourself a little script for the conversation.
And they even offered a kind of formula for that communication, didn't they?
Yeah. Yes, it's a classic structure, really effective, and often uses I statements. It goes something like this. First, Describe the situation and your feelings using I statements. For example, when X happens, I feel Y. Like, I feel overwhelmed when, or I feel uncomfortable when.
Okay, start with your feeling.
Right. Then second, express your desired result or the boundary itself. I need to ask you to. Or going forward, I will be. Or my limit is...
Say it the need clearly.
Yes. And third, state the consequence. Now, this can be positive, explaining the benefit of respecting the boundary, either for you or for the relationship. Or it can be negative, stating clearly what you will do if the boundary isn't respected.
Okay, let's run through a few examples from the sources to make that concrete. How about for dealing with office gossip?
Okay, yeah. So it might sound something like, I feel uncomfortable when we engage in office gossip. I need to ask you to please refrain from sharing gossip when I'm around. This will help me feel safer in our workplace and actually allow me to build better working relationships with the team.
Okay, I see it. Starts with the feeling, I feel uncomfortable, states the boundary clearly, I need to ask you to refrain, and then explains the positive outcome. Help me feel safer, build better relationships. It's firm, but it focuses on a positive result for the work environment.
Exactly. How about another one, maybe for being interrupted in meetings?
Good one.
Could be. I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted during our meetings. I'd like to ask that you please wait until I'm finished speaking. These interruptions prevent me from fully expressing my ideas, and honestly, they undermine our team's value of respect.
Again, I feel frustrated. The specific request, wait until I'm finished, and then explaining the impact, linking it not just to personal annoyance, but to team effectiveness and shared values. That's smart.
Yeah. And one more, maybe for those stressful last-minute requests.
Oh yeah, happens all the time.
I get anxious when I'm asked to do things with very little notice. I need you to discuss timelines with me before we commit to shared deadlines. This will allow me to manage my workload effectively and produce higher quality work on our shared projects.
That one's great because it frames the boundary request in terms of better productivity and quality, which can be really effective, especially at work. Other sources gave simpler examples too, right? Like just stating.
Yeah, things like, I'll be leaving the office on time today, or actually after work isn't the best time for me to discuss heavy topics, or even the simple direct, please call before you come over. The key really is being direct, being clear, and being assertive but not aggressive, and focusing on the solution, like what you need to happen going forward rather than just complaining about the problem.
That feels like a crucial distinction. Tell them what you do need.
Okay, step 4. And this one is often called out as the hardest part. Enforce or uphold the boundary.
This is absolutely 100% non-negotiable if you want your boundaries to actually mean anything. As one expert put it very clearly, you must uphold your boundary, especially if others test it or violate it. And that means you have to be prepared to actually take action or respond on your end when it happens.
So it's not enough to just say the boundary. You have to show you mean business. Right. And this involves thinking ahead about what the consequence will be if a boundary is violated. And this is important, making sure that consequence is something you actually have the power to control. For example, if you've asked someone to please call before stopping by and they keep showing up unannounced, a consequence within your control might be not opening the door, or opening it and saying calmly but firmly, oh, hi. As I mentioned, I really need people to call first. Now isn't a good time, but let's plan something for later this week. You see, you're not controlling their behavior, showing up, but you are controlling your response, not letting them in, reinforcing the boundary.
And consistency here is vital, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. If you let boundaries slide sometimes, you're basically teaching people that they don't really need to take them seriously. Staying firm, even when it feels really uncomfortable, or even when they react badly, that's how people learn what your limits actually are. And over time, that consistency really does pay off. Most people will eventually learn to respect the limits you've clearly and consistently set.
Okay, this framework, identify, define, communicate, enforce, that gives a really clear roadmap. And it's helpful to remember, too, that boundaries aren't just one single thing. They apply to different areas of our lives.
Yes, exactly. The sources touch on various types. There are physical boundaries, your personal space, maybe your workspace. Emotional boundaries, like not taking responsibility for other people's feelings, managing your own reactivity. Mental boundaries, protecting your thoughts, your beliefs, not letting others hijack your mental energy.
Okay.
Then, energy boundaries, really knowing your capacity, saying no when you're depleted. Time boundaries, managing your schedule, being punctual, protecting your time. And even conversational boundaries, deciding which topics you are and are not willing to discuss. Understanding these different domains helps you see where you might need to apply that 4-step process.
That definitely paints a broader picture of where this framework might be needed. So, okay, we have the map now, but let's get real. The journey isn't always a smooth ride. That brings us to section 5, the hard truths. Navigating the challenges and, frankly, the discomfort that often comes with setting boundaries.
Yeah, this section is so important because understanding the difficulties helps you prepare for them mentally and emotionally. And the first hard truth, according to the experts, is pretty straightforward. Boundaries have a cost.
A cost? What kind of cost are we talking about?
Well, setting a limit usually involves disappointing someone or not meeting their expectations. You're essentially changing the unspoken rules of the relationship. And there can be consequences depending on who it is, your boss, a colleague, a family member, a friend. The cost is often feeling guilty yourself, yes, but also potentially dealing with the other person's reaction, which might be disappointment or anger or even them pulling away for a bit.
So you really have to be willing to sit with that initial discomfort and maybe ride out a negative reaction.
Yes, you have to be prepared to face that initial reaction, tolerate the guilt that might come up for you, and just persevere. It's not about being fearless. It's about acting despite the fear and discomfort. And practicing self-compassion while you're navigating those feelings is really key. Reminding yourself why you're doing this, that it's necessary. Self-care doesn't make the guilt disappear instantly, but it helps you sit with it without judging yourself so harshly.
Another hard truth that was highlighted is the impact of power and status. That feels really important to acknowledge.
It's absolutely critical. The ability to set boundaries, let's be honest, isn't the same for everyone. If you're in a more junior position at work, or if you have significant caregiving responsibilities, or if you belong to a marginalized group, setting boundaries can feel much, much riskier. It could potentially impact your livelihood or even your safety in some situations.
The sources acknowledge that systemic change is needed there, but they also offer some insights for individuals who are in those tougher positions, right?
Yes. It's really about identifying your zone of control. Even in a really challenging situation, where can you carve out even a small space for yourself? It might be something seemingly small, like letting non-urgent calls go to voicemail after hours, or setting mental boundaries about what news or social media you engage with, or just finding tiny moments for rest during a demanding day. There's that powerful quote, "Rest is resistance."
Ah, yes.
For people in really demanding or even oppressive situations, prioritizing rest and self-care is an act of resistance. It's maintaining your integrity against forces that might otherwise completely deplete you.
That reframe of rest as resistance is, yeah, that's profound. What's another hard truth we need to face?
A big one. You probably won't get permission or approval from everyone.
Especially not from the people who've kind of benefited from your lack of boundaries up till now.
Precisely. The people who are most comfortable with the way things were are often going to be the least happy when you start changing the rules. You really shouldn't expect them to just cheerfully sign off on your new limits. You have to mentally prepare for the discomfort, maybe some conflict, and definitely a period of the disequilibrium in the relationship as things readjust.
So you have to be ready to manage their disappointment or their anger without taking responsibility for their feelings.
Exactly. And a related practical tip that came up within this hard truth: try not to over-explain your boundaries. Giving really long justifications often just gives the other person something to argue against or pick apart. Just state your boundary clearly, calmly, and then be prepared to hold it without feeling like you need to mount a huge defense.
Okay, keep it simple. Another difficult reality, especially when you're feeling totally overwhelmed. Sometimes setting boundaries means you have to let some balls drop.
This is so key. When you've been doing way too much for too long, saying no or I can't right now inevitably means something isn't going to get done, or at least it's not going to get done by you. The glass versus rubber balls metaphor is really useful here.
Explain that one.
You identify which of your obligations are truly critical. Those are the glass balls. If you drop them, they shatter. Think maybe core job responsibilities, critical health needs, key relationships. Then you identify the rubber balls, things that are less crucial. Maybe they can wait. Maybe they could be delegated or handled by someone else. If you drop those, they might bounce or someone else might pick them up later.
So it requires making really conscious choices about where your limited capacity goes, and then communicating those choices, even if it means acknowledging, hey, this particular thing isn't going to happen right now.
Exactly. And maybe the deepest, hardest truth of all is that the biggest barrier often isn't even the other person. It's your own inner world.
This loops back to those psychological barriers we talked about earlier.
Yes. It's that internal resistance. Maybe an unwillingness to be the kind of person who says no, maybe clinging to that go-to identity we discussed, or maybe feeling like you still have to somehow prove your worthiness by being endlessly helpful. There's also this concept of competing commitments.
Competing commitments.
Yeah, these are like unconscious beliefs or maybe hidden loyalties that actively work against the conscious change you're trying to make, like setting better boundaries. Your conscious mind wants change, but some deeper part is committed to keeping things the same, maybe for safety or belonging reasons.
Wow. So your desire for change is literally competing with these hidden parts of yourself.
Exactly. And your inner critic, it's usually right there, cheering on the resistance, amplifying all those doubts and fears. So overcoming that internal resistance, challenging the critic, getting curious about those competing commitments, gently letting go of those old identities, that's often the most profound. And yeah, the hardest work in learning to set boundaries effectively.
It's really about cultivating a more compassionate inner ally to support you through it. And finally, there was one quote that really seemed to crystallize the core difficulty here. We cannot simultaneously set a boundary and take care of another person's feelings. It's impossible. The two acts contradict.
Yeah, that quote is pretty blunt, isn't it? But it's necessary. It really underscores that you are not responsible for managing how someone else feels about your boundary. Their emotional reaction is theirs. It belongs to them. It's their work to process. Your job is simply to set and uphold your limit respectfully.
Okay. These hard truths, they're not meant to discourage people, are they? They're more about equipping you. Knowing what challenges might pop up makes them less likely to completely derail you when they do.
Exactly. Preparedness is key. It's not easy work, we have to be honest about that, but it is profoundly worth it.
And that takes us perfectly into Section 6, reclaiming your peace and energy, the profound happiness of boundaries. What is the payoff? What happens when we actually manage to do this difficult work?
Well, the sources are pretty much unanimous on this. The outcome is transformative. It fundamentally shifts your experience of happiness, your sense of peace, and definitely your energy levels.
It comes back to protecting that vital energy we started with. As one expert described it, boundaries act like a necessary shield, preventing your energy from just being constantly drained by demanding situations and people. They create the space needed for your energy to actually replenish and thrive, instead of just leaking away all the time.
Yeah, and saying no to those things that consistently drain you. It leaves you feeling lighter, more focused, and genuinely more at peace. You're not walking around carrying all that resentment or just feeling utterly depleted all the time.
And it's such a powerful act of self-love, isn't it? And self-worth. Setting boundaries is like this tangible affirmation that, yes, you are worthy of having needs, you're worthy of having space, you're worthy of being treated with respect.
Absolutely. And interestingly, as you cultivate more of that self-love and a deeper sense of your own worth, it actually makes setting boundaries easier over time. You start to rely less on external validation, and you find more of that inner strength to set limits without being crippled by guilt.
Setting boundaries also creates space, actual space for growth. When you start saying no to things that drain you, or maybe things that just don't align with your values anymore, you free up time and energy.
Exactly. And that freed up space allows you to say a much more enthusiastic yes to the things that truly matter to you. Maybe it's your passions, your personal goals, nurturing key relationships, or simply getting enough rest. It's really about curating a life that feels more aligned with who you are and what you value.
And kind of counterintuitively for some people, boundaries actually lead to healthier relationships in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. While the initial process of setting them might cause some temporary friction, maybe some awkwardness, in the long run, healthy boundaries foster mutual respect. They build trust because communication becomes clearer. They really create a foundation for a more genuine connection.
Yeah, because when you're not feeling burnt out and resentful all the time, you can actually show up more fully and intentionally for the people you care about, instead of just feeling obligated or worse, taken for granted.
And the mental health benefits really circle back powerfully here too. Boundaries help prevent that emotional exhaustion and burnout. They significantly reduce stress and anxiety. They improve your ability to regulate your own emotions. And they genuinely help you reclaim your peace of mind.
They really do protect your inner landscape and contribute to your resilience too.
Definitely. By conserving your finite resources, your time, your energy, your emotional capacity, boundaries help you build resilience. You just have more in reserve to cope with challenges when they inevitably pop up, instead of being constantly worn down to the nub.
And ultimately, all this leads to a really profound sense of empowerment, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Setting boundaries is fundamentally about taking back control of your life. It allows you to prioritize your own needs, to focus on your goals, and to feel like you are actively steering your life, rather than just being constantly tossed around by external demands and expectations. It really is an act of liberation.
And there's that fantastic Brené Brown quote that captures the essence of this so perfectly. Daring to set boundaries is about the courage to love ourselves, even if we risk disappointing others. We can't base our own worthiness on others' approval. Only when we believe, deep down, that we are enough can we say enough.
That quote just ties it all together so beautifully, doesn't it? The courage it takes, the foundation in self-love and self-worth, acknowledging the real risk of disappointing others, and that ultimate freedom that comes when you finally decide, okay, enough is enough.
It really grounds the whole practice in self-worth, not just in, trying to avoid conflict, which feels like a really key shift. Okay, so how can we actually begin? Let's move into section 7, practical tips for becoming, as one source put it, an awesome boundary boss.
Love that. Okay, the first tip, and this builds right on that identification step we talked about. Know your limits. This means really taking the time to reflect deeply on what drains you and what replenishes you, understanding your own capacity, your own needs. That's absolutely foundational.
Right. You can't draw a line if you don't even know where your edge is. Okay, second tip, communicate clearly and assertively.
Yeah, practice being direct about what you need. Use those I statements we talked about. Be specific about what the boundary actually is. Express your needs and your feelings respectfully, but also firmly. And remember, your tone of voice and your body language can convey respect, even when you're saying something that might feel difficult.
Consistency is number 3. We touched on this, but it bears repeating.
Yes, staying firm over time is absolute crucial. Inconsistency just undermines the boundary and confuses people. It basically teaches them that they just need to push a little harder next time to get you to cave.
Number 4, practice self-compassion.
Oh, so important. Be kind to yourself throughout this entire process. It's hard work. You're essentially learning a new skill, maybe unlearning old patterns. Allow yourself to feel those uncomfortable emotions like guilt or fear without judging yourself for having them. You're not doing anything wrong just by feeling things.
5th tip, remember boundaries can be set kindly.
Yes. This is so crucial to counteract that myth that setting boundaries is somehow inherently selfish or mean. You absolutely can advocate for your needs using calm words, a kind tone, and genuinely good intentions. Sometimes framing it as an act of care for the relationship because it prevents burnout and resentment down the line can be really helpful.
Okay, number 6, focus on solutions.
Right. When you're communicating a boundary, try to tell people what you need or what you would like to happen going forward, rather than just dwelling on all the past boundary violations. This gives them clear, actionable direction on how they can interact with you respectfully in the future.
Makes sense. 7th, manage others' reactions.
Again, so key. Remember, you are not responsible for how other people react to your boundaries. Their discomfort, their anger, their disappointment, that often stems from the loss of a dynamic that, frankly, probably benefited them more than it benefited you. Your job is to tolerate their discomfort without trying to fix it for them, or, crucially, without rescinding your boundary just to make them feel better.
Okay, 8th, reframe. It's not selfish.
Yes. Actively challenge that ingrained belief that putting your needs first is selfish. It is necessary. It's necessary for your well-being, it prevents burnout, and paradoxically, it actually allows you to show up better and more authentically in your relationships in the long run. Think of it as self-preservation, not selfishness.
Good reframe.
Yeah.
Number 9, start small and practice.
Yes. Don't aim for perfection right out of the gate. A small, maybe imperfectly worded boundary that you actually set and uphold is infinitely better than no boundary at all. Try experimenting in lower stakes situations first. The more you practice, honestly, the easier it gets. It really is like a muscle that gets stronger with use.
10th tip, remember, boundaries are dynamic.
Right. Your needs are going to change as you grow, as your life circumstances evolve. So, your boundaries can and probably should change too. What worked for you a year ago might not work now, and that is perfectly okay. Be willing to reassess and adjust them as needed. 11th, learn from your experiences. Take time to reflect on specific boundary-setting attempts. What went well? What felt really difficult? What did you learn about yourself, or about the other person, or about the situation? Every interaction is a chance to refine your skills and understanding.
12th, clarify expectations. Be clear, both with yourself and with others, about the expectations in your various roles and relationships. Sometimes just proactively clarifying things up front can prevent a whole lot of boundary issues before they even start.
Good point. And lastly, 13th. Conduct a boundary audit regularly. Maybe use tools like that hula hoop practice periodically just to check in with yourself, identify areas where you might be feeling drained, and see where new boundaries or maybe stronger enforcement of existing ones might be needed.
Okay, these tips really make the whole journey feel much more manageable. It's not about one giant leap, it's about this continuous process of learning, practicing, adjusting.
Exactly. It's about making consistent progress and, just as importantly, building that self-awareness along the way.
So we've really covered a lot today in this deep dive. We went from understanding the fundamental definition and why boundaries are so crucial for our well-being and energy to spotting those clear signs that ours might be struggling. We dug into those powerful psychological barriers that make it feel so hard, laid out that practical 4-step framework for actually setting them, faced some of those uncomfortable but necessary hard truths about the challenges involved, and finally really explored the profound peace, the reclaimed energy, and the genuine happiness that can come when we establish healthy limits in our lives.
It truly is such a vital lesson, isn't it? Learning how to create boundaries that manage to respect both yourself and others. It really does lead to a more authentic way of living.
As one source put it so beautifully, setting boundaries is ultimately about saying a resounding yes to yourself.
And doing that allows you to create a life that feels more harmonious, where you actually have sufficient energy not just to get through your obligations, but for the things that are truly meaningful and important to you.
It's really not about building walls to isolate yourself at all. It's about creating a life that has integrity, energy, and allows for real, authentic connection.
And that leaves us with maybe something powerful for you, the listener, to consider. If setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others, but really about saying a bigger, more deliberate yes to yourself, what is the most important yes that you need to honor in your own life this week?
Or maybe thinking about starting small and just practicing. Where's just one small place you could begin practicing this act of self-love today, knowing that even an imperfect boundary, one that actually gets set, is still significant progress.
Just start somewhere. Be compassionate with yourself as you go through the process, and trust that reclaiming your peace and your energy through setting healthy boundaries is a gift you absolutely deserve to give yourself.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the happiness of setting boundaries. We really hope this conversation has given you some clarity, maybe some validation, and perhaps the courage to begin or to continue this really transformative practice in your own life.